Great. So we are thrilled today to be joined by Scott Beale, who is not only a student of Go Master Coach, but already a practicing executive and career coach with a lot of social impact, leadership, and entrepreneurial experience. Most recently, Scott led global operations at the US Peace Corps. He managed 3,500-person team spanning 64 countries. Scott is also the founder of an international nonprofit named Atlas Corps that grew to a global fellowship of 1,500 social impact leaders from over 100 countries. Scott was twice named one of the top 50 nonprofit CEOs in the US and has worked for 2 US presidents. That's very impressive. And like me, is a triathlete. I'm not sure I would qualify myself as a triathlete, but you are, Scott. And his current races involve him trying to beat his 11-year-old, who not only beat him in a 5K recently, but also beat him in a 50K trail run. Wow, that's also very impressive. Congrats to your son. So now, as Scott earned his coaching certification with Go Master Coach, he coaches his purpose-driven change makers around the world, from social entrepreneurs in Nigeria to marketing executive in Vietnam to philanthropists in Argentina. And Scott, you are writing a book on this topic, The Leader's User Manual. So Scott, you are very welcome. Thanks for being here. We are so happy to have you here. And before we get started on the Leader's User Manual, I was hoping you could tell us a bit more about your leadership journey and specifically what motivated you to devote so much of your professional life to developing leadership in others.
Thank you, Geraldine. I appreciate the opportunity to chat with you all about this topic. I've been enjoying the Go Master Coach certification program immensely and all of the speakers that you've brought and trainings that you've done. And so it's nice to be able to contribute on this topic that I care a lot about. I'm also happy to begin with a short reflection on my leadership journey as well. And trying to make it concise, I would say there were 2 really key critical moments in my life which really shaped my leadership journey. The first was when I was back in college, like so many people who are shaped at that age. I saw an opportunity to go volunteer in Bosnia in the late 90s, right after the Bosnian War. The Dayton Peace Accords had been assigned. And it was assigned on campus to go work and pray for peace in Bosnia for a week, but you had to pay $1,000. And I was on financial aid, and there was just no way this was going to happen until a buddy of mine said, just raise the money. And like literally that concept had never been introduced to me in my life before. And with his help and guidance, I wrote 10 letters to 10 churches. 7 of them gave me $100. I got a job delivering the Washington Post. And to my mother's dismay, I was on a plane to Bosnia. I was able to see at a young age that asking for help and believing in yourself can really help you accomplish things that people didn't really think was possible. And this short week of this living overseas and meeting people from around the world really shaped my thoughts on international service and on leadership in so many ways. A decade later, if I were to advance forward a lot to the second key moment in my leadership journey, was when I was living in India. I see some folks from India on this call, or I think someone in the chat said they were calling in from India. I was living in New Delhi at the time, working for the US Department of State, and I met some individuals developing an Indian AmeriCorps program, or a domestic service program for Indians volunteering in India. And I thought, wouldn't it be neat if India had its own Peace Corps? Opportunity for rising middle class of Indians to volunteer in other countries. I knew how much international service had shaped my life, and I wanted to give that opportunity to other young professionals from around the world. And so, to make a long story shorter, I left my job at State Department, launched Atlas Corps, and developed this global fellowship for social change leaders from all over the world, which I ran for 15 years, and then ultimately passed off when I had an invitation to go help run global operations at the US Peace Corps. So it's just a snapshot of how my leadership journey has been shaped by others and through international travel and through volunteerism, but it still is, I'm in Vietnam now, it's still a big part of who I am today.
Thank you so much, Scott. That's very, very impressive. Thank you for sharing. So you worked with global leaders from really around the world, from everywhere in the world. In your experience, have you observed any common skill that they all needed to develop further better?
Absolutely. Communication skills is almost certainly the first that would come to mind. You know, different countries, different regions, different people have different strengths. Even different sectors have different areas that they're really strong at. And it's one of the beauties of bringing such a diverse group of people together is that they learn from each other. The monitoring evaluation that's done in Europe, really from nonprofit leaders there, but the way that leaders in India, for example, are very smart with resource development, but communication skills across the board. And there are a lot of ways of communicating, whether it's spoken or, of course, writing or even social media these days. But communication skills were always something that leaders could develop further, and a direct correlation to the better you communicate, the better you lead. So it's something that we always spend a lot of time on in our training program, was to help make leaders communicate more effectively.
Amazing. All right. And how did the leader's user manual first get developed based on this experience, and how did it help with communication?
You know, as a CEO, a relatively young CEO at the time, I was always looking for peers and other people who I inspired to learn from. And there's actually a LinkedIn post. I think some of you may have seen this opportunity for this webinar on LinkedIn as well, from a woman named Abby Falik, who wrote a LinkedIn post about sharing her leader's user manual. And the tagline was, leaders don't come with an instruction guide or a user manual, but maybe they should. And Abby had read in the New York Times business section an article about how, especially a lot of tech CEOs, were developing these user manuals to help their staff better understand their behaviors, their actions, their preferences, to create a stronger spirit among the team and improve teamwork. And so Abby thought that it was really critical that she do it. So I thought it would be, maybe it wouldn't have that much of an effect, but I also thought it'd be pretty easy to write. And I was wrong on both accounts. It was actually a lot harder to write than I expected, and it had a much, much bigger impact than I expected. And so every year I updated it and used it as a tool with my team, and then have used it for many years in teaching leadership to other people.
Thank you very much for sharing that. And I can't wait to learn more about this user manual. So let's turn it over to you then to go over our agenda. Let's jump right in, Scott.
Let's jump right in. Okay. Hopefully I can get the technology to work, practice my own communication skills on this webinar, but I am taking smiles from the cameras that you all can see my screen. So this is what we're going to discuss in the next, 48 minutes. We'll do an executive coaching session on developing your leader's user manual. We'll spend a little bit of time on what it is and why it's important. I'll go over the key components of a leader's user manual. We will then break into some small groups for about 15 minutes, 12 to 15 minutes, to discuss what you might include in your user's manual, and as a smaller group, discuss some of the questions that you may have. We'll then come back together as a larger group for a little bit of larger self-reflection and on the importance of using the user manual as a self-reflection tool and a way to build trust among your teams. And then we should have plenty of time for questions at the end, but we can also, it's a manageable enough group that if there are questions as we go, Geraldine, I don't mind you interrupting me, or I won't monitor the chat, but people can put questions in the chat as well. Great. Let's get started then. Okay. So what is a leader's user manual? Oh, I didn't actually want to go ahead. I wanted to make this a little interactive. I'm going to pull the chat up. We sent just 24 hours ago a couple early chapters of this manuscript. It's obviously not a published book yet, but I'm going to see if I can see the chat at the same time, even though I'm sharing my screen. Well, what do folks think the user manual is based off what you read or have heard me say already today? Do we have any brave souls participating in the chat. I can't actually see the chat.
I can see it. So please feel free to share in the chat. Happy to comment. Yeah.
I may be making it too interactive too early. Okay. You've been warned. I'll even call on people if I have to. So what is a leader's user manual? Well, it's a personal guide. It's not a organizational user manual. It's not even a corporate culture manual. It's a guide that you use as a CEO or as a manager or as a leader of teams to share with others who are working with you your thoughts, your preferences, how you prefer to lead. Because what I've learned is that we think our employees know a lot about us. We think they know our preferences, but the truth is, best case scenario, they learn it over 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, many years working with you. Best case scenario, they learn it by talking to their peers, probably making some mistakes, doing some things right. This is a shortcut to tell people in their first month, hey, this is how I think and act. And understanding that will help us be more productive together. It's a communication tool, generally internal for your teams, but it could also be for even peers or even your supervisors. I share this with my board of directors, and it helps people understand your personality type, how you process information, how you make decisions, and it really helps people decode your actions and doesn't leave them just guessing. And really, one of the amazing aspects of this tool, and it's in fact why I use it as a coach, is it's a self-reflective exercise. Because you'd be surprised, you'd be very surprised, or at least I can say I was. I worked from, when I wrote my first leader's user manual, I'd been working with my team for about 7 or 8 years as a CEO of Valscore. I already won awards. Most of my team had been with me for over 5 years of that 8-year period, some since the beginning. I thought people knew who I was. And really, people, how I saw myself and how other people saw me wasn't the same. And so that was both a learning opportunity for me, but of course also for my team to help understand what I aspire to as a leader, but then in some cases where I was falling short, and even in some cases where I wasn't giving myself enough credit. And this user manual can be almost like a self-written 360 to help you understand your preferences and share with your team how you think and act. So why is this important? Well, I think it's always important to start with why. I went to what first, but we're getting why pretty early. It really is a matter of trust and clarity and really improving your performance. And when I said communication skills were something that nonprofit leaders around the world need to work on, I mean, I think it's something that leaders in all sectors, I've worked in government as well, a little bit in the private sector, people just simply don't communicate very well. And it's often the source of lots of friction. That is particularly true when you're dealing with cross-cultural teams. That's particularly true when you deal with teams that are remote or meetings that are via Zoom. There's just a lot that is misunderstood and not clearly communicated. And when you poll staff about this, groups like Gallup and Robert Half, the staffing agency, say communication is the most commonly cited skill that leaders lack. That 46% of US employees across all industries said that they ranked communication as the top priority for leadership trait, which it was even more important than integrity and competence, which is kind of crazy because you would think integrity and competence would be higher, but people actually don't care if you make mistakes as long as you clearly communicate that you made those mistakes. And then another survey of workers showed that about a third reported their bosses lacked effective communication skills. This is the classic case of people getting promoted into a leadership position, but not because of their ability to lead, but their ability to do, in some cases, the level below. And so strengthening your communication skills is a very tangible thing that you can do to be a more effective leader. So user manuals build team trust faster, especially in these diverse teams that we all work in today, and they promote that self-awareness. And really, at the end of the day, employees are horrible mind readers. We cannot leave it up to our teams to try to read our minds. That's just not really very fair. In the book, there's a handful of reasons why we go into why this is so important. Here's just a few of them. One is the bridging the understanding gap. again, especially when I've worked with leaders from over 100 different countries, and culture is often hidden or underneath the surface. And if you could bring it up to the surface about the way you think and act, it really helps increase understanding. People don't need to think the same and act the same to become a cohesive team. They just need to understand how you think and act. If you're quick to make decisions, that's okay if someone understands that. If you're someone who wants to process information more, or you're risk friendly, people understand that a good team will have different personalities and perspectives, and understanding how their supervisor thinks and frankly how their coworkers think is really, really, really important. A user manual for a leader can set clear expectations for their teams and really set clear expectations about how they want to be communicated with, how they want to have information delivered to them. I loved, I loved delegating work. I really trusted my teams. I trusted people very quickly, but I also wanted people to bring challenges to me when they had them. And to be honest, I really wanted them to bring ideas for solutions at the same time. Because again, I hired great people, I had a great team, but I wanted to work with them and support them along those ways. And then really to be able to make them more effective at the work that they do. It also increases transparency. I've seen in the past for people who reported to me, but also were managers themselves, you would sometimes get conflict between the manager and their reports. And sometimes I would say, well, let's go to the leader's user manual. Let's see what are their expectations and when reports are going to be shared, how often that you're going to meet, kind of what their preferences are. Maybe this is a personality conflict that you're having trouble with, not even so much a performance conflict. Let's see if we can break it down that way. And so there are a lot of benefits to a user manual, and really fundamentally documented that doesn't take that long to create, but has a lot of pieces to it. Geraldine, I know you had a chance to look at some of the chapters as well. Did you want to add anything from what you saw in all your years of experience as a coach?
No, yeah, thank you very much. It's really, really, really insightful. And I read the chapter, and I read many things about you. And for me, just reading and understanding who you are ENFP, and you like big picture, and you can become impatient from what you've shared in the chapter. So I can adjust if I were to work with you to collaborate, and even just as a as coach, for me, it's extremely useful to understand that, and I can adjust my communication style. I can communicate differently. I will talk big picture with you. We're gonna go fast. I will not bother you with too many details. So this is really helpful for me to understand how to communicate and how to influence you maybe as well. It's a great way as well in that sense. So as a coach, as a trainer in our relationship, it's very useful for me. And if I were to work for you, it would be also extremely precious. Absolutely.
I know there are other coaches on this call who, some who are students and graduates of Go Master Coach. And especially for executive coaching, I use it as the very first session. And it's really to get to know the client and how they think and act and what their preferences are. And again, a good 360 is actually hard to beat. But frankly, sometimes with CEOs, a good 360 is tough because even though they may have a supervisor in with the board, the board chair may not actually work that closely with them, depending on the relationship. And even 360s with CEOs or leaders can be difficult because people don't always trust the information is anonymous. So they're not always willing to give, if it's a small team, for example, good feedback. So this is a pretty easy way to get some self-awareness and other awareness for people that you're working with as a coach as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a question on that part, and talking about cultural differences. Would you think leaders from different countries would share more or less in their user manual? How would you encourage? Because in some countries, it's not so easy to share about your style, your communication. Self-awareness is something almost private, I would say. So
Absolutely. In fact, I have a whole chapter this one's not finished, wasn't ready to share, but on why people don't use leaders' user manuals, and frankly, why it's not taught in business schools or a common practice that you get. But I think one of the reasons is that well, one, people just assume that their staff knows them well enough, that they don't actually think it's going to make a difference, and that they already know. So there's a lot of like assumptions that go into it. But I also think that there is insecurities and people saying, well, I don't want so much of a focus on me. It's not all about me. It's about the team. And in my culture, it's not really appropriate for me to put my preferences forward so straightforwardly, especially as cultures, which are most cultures in the world, which are indirect cultures, as opposed to a direct culture, where it is culturally more appropriate to learn something by asking somebody than it is for you to tell them directly. So I get it. That being said, when you are a CEO working across cultures, not everyone has the same style or the same cultural preferences or biases. And so this doesn't need to be a grandiose document. This doesn't need to be something that people memorize. You'd be shocked. I've given this literally to dozens and dozens and dozens of people who worked directly for me, and I know a lot of them didn't read it. And I was always like surprised. I was like, really? Like, I am actually your boss, and this is a 4-page document, a 3-page document. So people don't have to read it. You're not going to quiz them on it. But when you put something down in writing like this, even if it seems a little forward, it really helps the employee. And it's with their best interest and the team's best interest in mind. It's not that you're asking people to like make you coffee with an exactly certain amount of milk. It's not that you're being, I suppose, if you're that kind of leader, perhaps it is. But for most people, you can also share a little bit of humility, a little bit of humor, a little bit of humanity when you share a document like this, even if you have specific preferences, which in fact, many leaders do have preferences. They're just not always articulated very well.
That's very clear. Thank you very much, Scott.
Okay, well, let's get into what is in your user manual. So again, we emailed out an excerpt of the book in advance. So hopefully some of you saw it. You can use it as a reference. You can follow with me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to share with you more. So feel free to take notes, but I'll send you notes afterwards as well. But there are some core elements to what makes, at the end of the day, it should be a fairly concise document. The first is this idea, these first two are your leadership style and your core values. Are you an entrepreneur? Are you a collaborative decision maker? This can even get into your personality types. Are you an ENFP? Geraldine and I were talking about that earlier. What are your strength finders? What's your DISC preference? You could put all those things in there if you want, depending on what the culture is of your organization or what you're familiar with. But at the end of the day, what kind of leader are you aspiring to be? And do you show up at the workforce every day? And what are some of your values, be it trust or timeliness or follow through or discretion? I mean, everyone values everything, but at the end of the day, we have some values that are really core to who we are that if the team signs on to, will make people be more effective. One of my values, for example, is I really believe in innovation. I really believe in moving quickly. I really believe in being entrepreneurial. And I told my team that it was more important that they do mistakes of action as opposed to mistakes of inaction. So it drove me crazy when people on my team were like, well, it wasn't really exactly my job, so didn't really do it. I think it was someone else's job. But then, month would go by, quarter would go by, and some things that even we had discussed, no one would do because they weren't exactly sure the parameters of the work or it just didn't fall into their statement of work. I much prefer someone take initiative and make a mistake, especially within reason, than just sit back and not take initiative. And so articulate those things. I'm okay with mistakes. We'll actually talk about it at the end of the year in your employee evaluation. What are some mistakes of action you made this year? And they can like say it proudly, like, oh, I made this mistake, but it was a mistake of action. And I tried to really honor that in the culture within our team. And additionally, we talk about communications and expectations. How do you prefer to interact with people? How do you want people to communicate with you? A lot of people work in remote environments. We don't have the benefit of having an open door policy in our corner office of the high rise. A lot of people are working from home. Do you want people to chat you? Do you want people to email you? There's so many different ways that we can communicate. You might as well just put it down here, what your expectations are of others. What are your support needs? And even some cases, your triggers or your pet peeves. One of mine as an entrepreneur is I literally hate it when people say, well, that's impossible. Like it literally drives me crazy. And I end up having this like long tangent about why I really would prefer they not use that phrase, because in almost every case, things are possible. It's just a matter of, well, yes, we could do that, but it would take us 12 months to develop the product, and we would have to spend this amount of money. And there's things are almost always possible. It's just not necessarily worth doing them. So let's discuss like what is possible, what we can do, and please don't give me this, well, that's impossible answer when we're brainstorming on ideas, because that just shows it's a comment that shuts down creative thought. It's like a pet peeve of mine. Clearly, you can see I'm all worked up over it. I've lost like my idea what I was going to say here, but like I don't like it when my team says that to me. And then even some personal touches or hidden gems. One of the things that I put in there, for example, that I'm a runner. For example, I love to talk about my family, but I often don't ask people about their family because, especially in American culture, it's a little bit more private. But ask me about mine, and I will ask you about yours. And then I put there near the end of my user manual, if you made it to the end of page 4, let me know what you liked most about this, and I'll buy you a cup of coffee. That's how I know that not everyone on my team's actually read the leader's user manual, because they didn't bother to tell me what they liked or didn't like about it. And so I didn't buy everybody coffee. So there's different elements that can go into it. Some people like shorter ones. They really shouldn't be much longer than 4 pages. And then the last element, which isn't on this slide though, but I wanted to mention, is an invitation for reciprocity. Even if they don't manage individuals, they don't have to be a leader per se of teams. They could be a leader of projects. What would their user manual look like? And I love to read other people's user manuals or people who work for me, and to use it again as a reflective tool to understand their leadership styles as well. Okay. I want to keep moving because I'm realizing that tangent on how I hate it when people say that's impossible just took me off schedule for a couple minutes. So how do you create your own manual? We'll talk about this, and then we're going to go into some breakout rooms really soon. So I want you thinking, as we went over these pieces, what would you include in your leader user manual? So when we go to the breakout room, you can share some thoughts with some of the groups that you'll be meeting with. Briefly, in creating your own manual, it's not that complicated. You find inspiration. You read someone else's leader user manual. You take a look at what you liked about others. I have a few in my book. There's others that are out there on LinkedIn, or you can find on Google. And you just write your first draft. Like, don't overthink it. It just write on like what you think makes you tick, and then share with a close colleague, someone who knows you really quite well. In some cases, not even someone who reports to you, to get their feedback, because your first draft really is not actually how you think and act. It's how you think and act, not really necessarily how you actually show up in the workplace. And then start to share it with your team more broadly. One of the expressions I always use is, I consider feedback a gift, one that I'm willing to give, and definitely one that I'm willing to receive. So I try to get feedback from people when doing my leader's user manual. And then after I have a document, I share it with new staff, and then every year, usually in the beginning of like January, I like tweak it a little bit, or whenever I started a new job. And so that's how you create it. It's amazing I'm writing a whole book about this because it's not actually that complicated, but it's such a useful tool. So let's break into some small groups. I think we have a couple dozen people. I was thinking maybe groups of 4 or 5. I'll let Feng and others. I'll jump in and out of some rooms. But here are your instructions. We're going to put these concepts into action and get started on creating your own user guide. And I want to note here that user guides, user manuals can sometimes be somewhat personal documents, and you don't know each other. So I want you to make a safe space in your Zoom breakout room while people share some of their thoughts. And so just be kind and patient and listening, but listen as they reflect their leadership style, and then start to think about what yours would be as well. We'll have about 14 minutes. I think about a couple minutes for each person would be probably sufficient. And then a timekeeper to make sure everyone gets a chance to go. And then if time permits, you can also have a broader conversation about the user manuals and what people liked about different manuals, and then giving some feedback. Willing to bet the time will go by fast, but then we'll pull you back in as a group to discuss with everybody else. Fun, are we ready?
Yes, we are. So yeah, 40 minutes. I've pasted the instructions in the chat, so you will have them in your breakout room as well. So enjoy and see you in 14 minutes.
Great. I'm going to create the room now.
Okay, cool. All right.
All right.
Welcome back. I hope you had a good breakout room. I kind of lurked into a few of your rooms, but the conversation was going so well that I felt like I was just imposing. But how did you feel? Who would like to share some of the discussion from their group, and specifically, were there any collective thoughts that people had or common themes that people shared? And we don't need to put it in the chat. We're just going to call on people, and I know some people on this call, so you might as well come off mute, because then I will call you.
So
Frank,
I'll just
go.
kickstart.
Oh, go ahead, go for it.
I'm Pauline. I think the topic of culture came up quite a bit in our conversation. Whether the use of this guide is actually how it's accepted may also be dependent on the culture, because not all cultures appreciate that openness, and so that was one thing. And the other thing that we discussed was in terms of using this as a possible tool for our clients, it does require the individual to be really committed to self-reflection. And if you're coaching people who are always busy and all that always seems to be like the last thing they want to do. So that was a question that we had more in terms of the usage of the user manual. I hope that was kind of what we got into. More of the culture issues, or not culture, I guess the culture challenges for the use of this book.
And Pauline, do you think if you worked in an environment that had a dominant, not just dominant like 60, 70%, but dominant 90+% culture, most people on the team are from Singapore, or most people on the team are from the States, let's just take an Asian culture, would there be a way to write it that would reflect the values and preferences of culture in X country in Asia? Or do you still think it would be difficult to navigate in some indirect cultural environments?
I think in Singapore, and I think Tanso, you can jump in here because it was also one of your thoughts, we're multicultural. So I think there is already that sensitivity to not kind of, to maybe be overly conservative, maybe, because we don't want to create any cultural issues. But I think if most of the workforce is American, and they all tend to, there is I guess, when you read about that whole Erin Mayer book about the culture map, the high context versus the low context, if you've got a group of people who are high context, then generally they will be accepting of something like this. And because of the way it's going to be written based on them being high context. Similarly for the low context. And Chimpy, I don't know whether you want to add to that as well, because that was what you had raised.
No, absolutely well put, Pauline. I think it's I especially talked about coming from India to Europe, which was a very significant cultural change. And there, I think when I think of applying this, I think that it really depends on clients' willingness to explore and how committed they are for the self-reflection. So yes, culture is one layer, but the deeper layer is also individual layer, where despite the culture, whether the client is willing to explore or not.
And also, Scott, just to kind of answer your question, if you've got a Singaporean working in an American company, that's a different culture. And in terms of their acceptance of something like this, suddenly will be a lot more positive versus one that's a Singaporean working in maybe a really Singaporean company with the local culture. That might be a bit different.
I think one of the challenges that I've seen in working in extremely diverse cultural environments, both Atlas Corps and Peace Corps, is that whether you write down your preferences and your cultural background or not, they're there, right? Like your boss and you as an individual have preferences, and it's just, are we willing to actually be self-reflective enough and transparent enough to do our teams the service to actually share what our preferences are?
Yeah.
And that's hard, right? And so, but again, the United States is a very direct culture, but it's also a very diverse direct culture, especially on the coast and in the big cities. And so there's a lot of sensitivity in the United States as well to these types of things. And I think it is one of the reasons why people don't necessarily do it. But not talking about those differences doesn't make those differences go away. It really actually makes them more challenging. The client's willingness
Agree.
is a super good point. I do want to keep moving. I can stick around more for questions afterwards as well. I had a client who just put it into ChatGPT and asked ChatGPT to write his user manual, and I thought that was both annoying and very reflective of the leader. But it's also not a bad way to get started. ChatGPT has learned a lot about leaders' user manuals from my clients, but I think I thought it should have reflected the individual's willingness to rely on technology to be reflective, as opposed to rely on his own introspection, which is a whole different challenge. Okay, I'm going to keep us moving, and let's talk about next steps, and then we can keep the conversation going with a little bit more Q&A as well. Okay, so next steps. So this is what I would like you to do. This may be ambitious, but I would like you in the next day to like write down some thoughts while they're fresh. If you think this is a tool that at a minimum would be useful for yourself, the self-reflective aspect of it, capture your thoughts while they're fresh. And then as you hopefully get a little more confident with it, if you're someone who manages teams, who's new in the workplace, but whatever it may be, continue sharing it with a colleague, and then ask for some feedback as you discover some of your own blind spots. Certainly if you're a coach, I don't think you can really assign this project without doing it yourself first. But also if you're a leader, a CEO, a manager, this can be, again, a very useful tool for you if you think you can navigate the difficult cultural aspects of it. And then refine it. This doesn't have to happen within the next 24 hours, but spend the next couple weeks revisiting it over time, sharing it with a few more people and iterating as you go to get some, and based on the feedback that you received. Where are some ways that you articulated your own leadership, but other people say you're not actually there? Or what other feedback do people give you? And then try implementing it. And again, you can be in touch with me over LinkedIn, or I actually have my contact information here on the bottom. I'm in Vietnam, I'm in Singapore a lot for those of you who are based in Southeast Asia. And I'm happy to kind of share with you more parts of the draft manuscript, give you some feedback as well. I'd like to hear from you about how this worked in different cultural environments, in different private sector, government, nonprofit, different environments. I learned so much from people who have used this tool, and see if you can be a tool that you take away from today's call to make you a better communicator and a more effective leader on your teams. We still have a little more time for questions. Geraldine, I'll go to you first, but we can, happy to do Q&A with the folks who are on this call as well.
Absolutely, yeah. Thank you so much. That was very, very insightful, and I've started to write my user manual as well. I'll share it with you. Anyone willing? Any questions? And that's as Shimpi mentioned, it's a great guide as well as coaches. We can ask our clients to do that and to share that with their teams. So that's definitely that can be extremely helpful. That's probably something we can add as well to the Go Master Coach toolbox as a tool, as an assessment. I think that would be a good one for leaders. Any questions? Let's use the time.
I have one question.
Yes.
Right. The session is really grateful, and it is very new for me, the user manual, right, for the leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So just now Scott shared these are the steps we need to do. But is there any kind of reference manual available? Because if you have to start to write yourself, you may need some reference, so at least you can reflect yourself where I am compared to here, and I can write, right? So any reference available.
You're queuing up the book that I'm writing, which is fantastic. Thank you for asking that. I don't know you. I did not plant that question. I appreciate it. So yes, I have this draft manuscript. We email it to people who had registered a few days in advance, the first couple of chapters of the book. But if you contact me, I'll put it in the chat as well. I can even send you more of the draft manuscript. And it is exactly that. It's a reference for you to help you write your own manual.
Sure, I will.
Thank you. We have a question. I don't know your name, Miss Angulo, I think. Sorry. What's your name? Sorry, I didn't get it. Okay.
Ayana.
Ayana.
Okay, you can hear me. I just wanted to know, so I had shared with my group that I have been writing these 3 to 4 page letters to welcome people on my team since, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago or so. And so some of it, I think it fits into the description of a user manual, but some of it has also been like my expectations for them. Like, you know, I might say, you know, respect is of the highest importance to me. You know, we don't throw things, we don't scream, you know, and then I would sort of weave in things like if I'm in Tanzania, say, you know, it really matters like the kind of language. So it's not okay to use expletives. So that's my expectation. So I'm just wondering if you think it's more important to have like just a pure leader's manual, or is it okay to sort of, which the other stuff has to change, right? Based on, at least in my current job, and hopefully my future job, we'll see. I've had to move around. And so some of what needs to change would depend on the context of the team.
Yeah,
And then just, I'm sorry, Scott, one other thing that if you could just address. And I also find that I'm more comfortable giving it to people when I'm welcoming them. But in cases where I've been joining a team that exists already, it just felt a little more pretentious.
Totally.
To give something.
Yeah, completely. So I don't want to lose that second point, but to your first point, there's no perfect leader's user manual, right? Like the perfect manual is one that is well received and well understood and actually read by your team. And so if it's done as a letter, that's amazing. If it's done as a PowerPoint slide, that's your style. I don't know if it really matters that much. It's nice having it be something that people can refer back to, like put it up on the shelf, they can pull it back out, something you can reshare maybe a year later. Hey, it's January, I'm resharing this. But I don't know if the format really matters that much. I think when you say like, hey, these are my expectations of you to not use bad language, that's not just you saying your expectations of them, it's also you saying these are my values. Because I do think this document needs to be fairly self-centered, which again, people struggle with, but it's like, look, these are my strengths, these are some of my weaknesses, these are my quirks. Let me just put them all out there for you in your first month, so you're not really confused when I do something that's weird, or that you don't understand, right? And so don't just make it, don't be late to work, don't do this. That's a different document. But don't swear when you say, my value is respect, and the way we demonstrate respect is by showing up on time, not using bad language, and saying good morning. That's okay to put in there. That seems appropriate to me. The joining a new team, that was tough for me as well, because I went from being the CEO of a nonprofit to being the number 3 at the Peace Corps, and still a position of power and respect, but I was joining a team that already existed, right? And I had people who were my boss. And so I didn't unveil it right away, especially, well, I did actually share with my direct boss, and I said, hey, this, after like a month or two, and I said, this is something I plan on sharing. And at that time, I joined the Peace Corps during the pandemic, so it was fully remote over time. But I think it is harder when you join a team. Maybe you wait 90 days, but don't wait forever, because people will be like, why didn't you show me this in the first 6 months? Like, save people the time by showing them this document first. I see Gwen's question. Should I just jump in, Geraldine?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, is that Todd?
Yeah, maybe let's take 2 last questions. So Gwen and Tan.
Right. So the question is, this user manual, what we create, right? It is kind of a live document. Example, time to time, right? We get some feedback from the colleague or others, right? Are we able to adjust?
Yeah, look, I absolutely think, when I was a CEO who didn't have kids, and then I became a CEO with kids, yeah, I changed a little bit. Like
Right,
I
right.
had different priorities, and there are other things that also, so it is important for you to periodically update it. You know, I will always be a big picture thinker. I always be fast moving, and I just need to put that out there so people understand that. That's probably
Right.
not going to change for me, but yes, the document should change as you change.
Thank you, Scott.
All right, and we have Gwen. Maybe one last question from Gwen. Do you want to share it, Gwen? Yeah, go ahead.
So in a nutshell, and forgive me, I'm not really communicating it as well as I'm thinking it. But when you have an organization where you're trying to effectively integrate two fundamentally different cultures to create a cohesive product or service that resonates with both cultural audiences, how far off of your overall values can you veer without losing the overall fundamental essence of who you are as an organization?
So, organizational culture is made up of so many things, but a big, big part of that is actually the culture and personality of the leaders themselves. And so, I mean, especially if you're the CEO writing this document, and you've built the company, you've built the nonprofit, chances are the culture has built up around how you want to think and act and behave. And so when team members come in and join that culture, it's good to understand the organizational culture as well as the values and preferences of the CEO. And different managers are going to need to conform to that overall organizational culture, to their boss's culture. Doesn't mean they need to lose their identity or need to lose their own preferences, but the pieces need to fit together. And that's why I think it's worth writing them down, because if the pieces don't fit together, if there's conflict, it's going to come out eventually. And it's always better for people to know in advance, look, I just need a little bit more time to think these things through, or I really don't want to see, I don't want to see drafts of memos. Just give it to me right. Just give it to me right the first time. Like, just put down some of those. I have an expectation of perfection or excellence or whatever that may be. And so when the CEO and the managers clearly articulate their preferences, that builds up into a larger organizational culture of how it's externally facing as well. And again, that always happens. It's just not always written down. And so it doesn't always work internally well, and that can create conflict. I hope that answered your question, Gwen.
Thank you, Gwen. And okay, let's have a final question. Very good one from Chia Hong.
Oh.
Yeah, go ahead, Chia Hong.
Sure. Thank you for accommodating. I think it was more of like a rolling thought as I was hearing these conversations. I think introspection in itself is a skill, and often in our society, it's one that's not really built and developed and challenged within individuals. It is, however, necessary to be able to write this document, this manual, without ChatGPT. It is challenging in itself. I guess there's two parts to the question. As a leader who perhaps is not that good at introspection yet, how do we then increase the quality of our manual? And secondly, it's kind of a bit meta in its own sense, because this manual reflects our introspection on ourselves as leaders, but it also requires a level of introspection from the reader, from the team member, from the recipient. It's another level of difficulty trying to or expecting that of the reader, right? So how is there a way we can prep or improve the quality of delivery?
Absolutely. And this is one where I do think culture from a societal culture can really play significantly, because in some cultures, giving direct feedback to your boss like that is just not very common or acceptable. Like asking a younger woman to give feedback to an older man in some cultures, my experiences in India, that just wasn't easily done. And so even in Vietnam, not to comment on every culture that I've lived in, like it's the respect for elders is so different. It's very difficult to give people that feedback. So, but to have a really good document, you need to be both reflective and also a good listener. And you need to be able to be in a work environment where people feel comfortable actually giving feedback. That's why I prompted by saying, I think feedback's a gift. I'm willing to give it. I'm willing to receive it. Please give me some feedback on this. And then, but people will pick 2 or 3 things to give you feedback on. They'll be light, and maybe only 1 of the 3 is actually real. But if you ask enough people, people will say, like you say in your document that you don't want us to like redo decisions once the decision's made to get behind it. But to be honest, like we do decisions here all the time at this organization. And so I think maybe that is one of these areas where your aspirational as a leader and your reality don't line up. Your direct report probably won't tell that to you, but maybe a peer who you really trust will, or maybe your boss will because they've heard it from other people. And so it just requires not just being reflective, but also being to create an environment of trust and listening to be able to really have a document that fits all, that meets the highest potential of a real leader's user manual.
Amazing, and I think that's an amazing way to conclude. It's really about leading by example and walking the talk and being an instrument for your own growth and for other people's growth as well, by modeling what we expect from ourselves is what we expect from others as well. Thank you so much, Scott. That was very inspiring, insightful. We learned a lot. And this is just the beginning of a conversation, I believe. We have your contact, LinkedIn and email in the chat, and we can't wait for your book to be published. And of course, we'll be the first, yeah, exactly, to read. Over to you, Scott.
Also, well, I'll wrap us as well, but thank you, Geraldine, for the opportunity to share with some other alumni and students and folks who are interested in this topic. Please do reach out if I can be of any help. And it's always encouraging for me when it's a new tool for them and something they give some different thoughts and reflections on. So if you have feedback for me after this, please send it my way. I'm actually quite serious when I say it. I do consider feedback that gift and appreciate everyone's participation. Thanks.
Thank you, Scott. Thank you. Geraldine, there is a Scott email in the chat.
Yes, it's in the chat. Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, we will share with you the slide. So you will,
Okay.
we will CC Scott so that you can directly reply to.
Okay. Thank you. I saw that now.
All right. Okay. Have a good one. Have a good evening. Have a good day, and see you soon.